George wants you to know that the rumors aren't true. He shared how much inspiration he got from Lord of the Rings for his A Song of Ice and Fire series, and also that Barristan's actor is a dirty, dirty liar. Okay, first, I want to start with George shared that Gandalf would take Dumbledore in a fight, and he pissed people off. You gotta remember, this is also the dude that said Smaug could take Dany's dragons in a fight. The guy is a hardcore Tolkien fanboy, so that's to be expected. Unfortunately, some Harry Potter fans got pretty peeved with him, so he wrote on that whole thing,
"Okay, this one is true. At the Q&A following the premiere of the new Tolkien film in Los Angeles last week, I did indeed say that Gandalf could kick Dumbledore's ass. Got a nice laugh, which was good. 'Cause it was a joke, you know. Which doesn't mean it isn't true. Gandalf could kick Dumbledore's ass. I mean, duh. He's a Meyer, folks. Next best thing to a demigod. Gandalf dies and comes back. Dumbledore dies and stays dead. But if it will calm down the Potterites out there, let me say that Gandalf could kick Melisandre's ass too."
I just absolutely love George, but I feel like no one would debate whether Gandalf would defeat Melisandre or not. They're not even in the same league. I mean, Gandalf would mop the floor with her. Come on. However, it is hilarious that Harry Potter fans are now raging out on George. Poor man can't get a break anywhere. A Song of Ice and Fire fans are freaking out on him, and now the Harry Potter community. Just stop talking, George. Just write Winds of Winter. Anyone and everyone's going to come for you, no matter what you say. However, George also dispelled a rumor that he hates Bronn, or Bronn's actor, writing,
"As long as I'm shooting down loony stories on the internet, there was also one that claimed I hate the character Bronn and or the actor who portrays him, Jerome Flynn. Total bullshit, not a shred of truth. I created Bronn, so it would be immodest of me to say he's a terrific character. But what the hell? He's a terrific character, and my readers will definitely be seeing more of him in the books to come. And Jerome Flynn has been just wonderful. It's been an honor to work with him. He's done a marvelous job of bringing Bronn to life."
George is actually killing rumors left and right lately, but before I go to the last rumor he shot down, which I think is actually the most important, I want to share an interview where he talked about his inspiration from Tolkien and how much of his series, A Song of Ice and Fire, is based off of Lord of the Rings. So in an interview, he stated,
"When I started writing Game of Thrones, one of the things I did was to look at Lord of the Rings and see what Tolkien did and try to take some lessons from it. A big lesson was his handling of magic. You know, I think a lot of epic fantasy has too much magic. But Middle-earth is suffused with a sense of magic. It's always on the peripheral, and it's used to set the stage. Gandalf is a wizard, but when orcs attack, he draws a sword and fights them. He doesn't just magically disappear them away, like what happens in so many other stories. I knew I wanted magic in Westeros, but to keep it in the background. Keep it low-key and mysterious. It's not like a fake science where you mix so much Batwing and so much virgin blood and you get something magic. It's not a cookbook. It's knowledge."
Which is interesting because George had previously shared that there was no scientific reason behind the seasons in his world, which, by the way, the planet his series takes place on is called Earth. Let me know if you're as disappointed as I am about that, but continuing on. So the seasons are based off magic and can't be explained. It seems to be George to flesh out some things and leave other things up to you to figure out, so a bit mysterious. The best example I can think of is gods in A Song of Ice and Fire. George wants you to come to the conclusion whether they actually exist or not. He's never going to confirm whether they do exist or not, and you're also never going to see them take bodily forms such as the characters we have in a series. Which honestly, I really like. I feel like there are some things you should definitely flesh out, and there's some things you should leave a mystery, such as the scene where Jon told Arya and Sansa his true identity. We should have seen all that. We should have known their reactions, but other things you can leave it more in the dark and let our own imagination take over. But feel free to disagree with me. It's cool. I'm not threatened by opposing opinions. George also explained that he modeled his first book off of Lord of the Rings, how it started small and then the world expanded, saying,
"The structure was very influential on Game of Thrones. If you look at the structure of Lord of the Rings, it all begins in the Shire and it's very small. Then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The Fellowship starts together with 4 hobbits and then they pick up Strider, Aragorn, and then they get to Rivendell, where they pick up more people. And for a while they're together, but then later in the books they split apart. They separate from the 2 groups. Now if you look at Game of Thrones, everybody except Dany starts out in Winterfell. Then certain things drive them apart, and then they're scattered all over the world."
Lastly, he shared a big difference between him and Tolkien, which, unsurprisingly to most of us, is language. He said,
"Language is one of the defining characteristics of his work, and he set a very high bar for all of us. He invented entire languages. I just fake it. When I sold Game of Thrones to HBO, they said, 'There are entire scenes here in Dothraki. Can you send us your Dothraki book and rules?' Tolkien would have responded promptly with a gigantic thing, whereas I had to say, 'I invented like 8 words.'"
Okay, I want to end with a conspiracy theory that I've been hearing for years and just drives me up the wall. Not really, I'm exaggerating, but it's still a little bit annoying, disappointing when people run with this. So George has had to, again, shoot down rumors that he hasn't finished the last 2 books and he's not waiting until the final season ends to publish them. And if you don't know, actually this rumor started with Barristan's actor Ian, who said,
"George has already written books 6 and 7, and as far as he's concerned, there only are 7 books. But he struck an agreement with David and Dan, the showrunners on the series, and he would not publish the final 2 books until the series has completed. So if all goes well, in another month or 2, we might get books 6 and 7. I'm intrigued to know how Barristan, for instance, ends up going through those final 2 books. George, I talked to him during season 1, and he did say to me that Barristan had a very interesting journey. But unfortunately, I didn't get to play all of that, so we'll have to wait and see."
So that was completely not true. And despite George constantly saying, no, I'm not even done with the Winds of Winter, and I'm not even going to start A Dream of Spring until I finish Winds of Winter, this is been just repeated everywhere. Seriously, every time I talk about the books and future publishing, I hear people say, "Oh no, they're already done." What? So George took to his own website to let us know? Stop it. I'm not done. He wrote,
"Internet journalism is an oxymoron. I'm more and more convinced. Of late it seems there's a new story about me somewhere on the net every day, or near enough to make no matter. Many get things wrong. For the most part, I ignore them. I have better things to do than try and track down every weird rumor and out-and-out fabrication that pops up on some obscure website trolling for traffic. Every so often, however, one of these stories gains an improbable currency, and just chuckling at the insanity no longer suffices. That seems to be happening right now. All of a sudden, this crazy story about my finishing The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring years ago is popping up everywhere. No, I'm not going to provide links. I don't want to reward misinformation with hits. I will, however, say for the record, no, The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring are not finished. Dream is not even begun, and I'm not going to start writing Volume 7 until I finish Volume 6. It seems absurd to me that I need to state this. The world is round. The earth revolves around the sun. Water is wet. Do I need to say that too? It boggles me that anyone would believe this story even for an instant. It makes not a whit of sense. Why would I sit for years on completed novels? Why would my publishers, not just here in US, but all around the world, ever consent to this? They make millions and millions of dollars every time a new Ice and Fire book comes out. As do I. Delaying makes no sense. Why would HBO want the books delayed? The books help create interest in the show, just as the show creates interest in the books. So no, the books are not done. HBO did not ask me to delay them, nor did David and Dan. There is no deal to hold back on the books. I assure you, HBO and David and Dan would both have been thrilled and delighted if The Winds of Winter had been delivered and published 4 or 5 years ago. And no one would have been more delighted than me. I have said it before, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Except here, of course.
I totally get his frustration, honestly, of one person saying something and then the rest of the world running with it. Oh my gosh, think about the Northern Swords being taken by Aegon the Conqueror. One dude made a blog post saying he heard George say, oh, because the Northerners surrendered, Aegon didn't take any of their swords, so none of them are in the Iron Throne. And now everyone believes that. And despite further evidence and George publishing word for word saying Aegon did take the Northern Swords, every time I say that, I have people tell me I'm wrong. Because of one dude who said it, and now everybody believes it. And that one dude wasn't George. It's insane. And every time I have to give them the quote from the book that shows, yeah, Aegon took the swords and they're part of the Iron Throne, I actually specifically went and questioned this to the highest authority. And they said, yeah, the Northern Swords are part of the Iron Throne. Why is that confusing you? And why it's confusing is because George may have said that at a convention years ago, this dude wrote it, and then everyone just ran with it. And we've seen that before, where George has said something at a convention, and then by the time he's published his works, he's completely changed it. With sample chapters that he reads at cons, he changes those dramatically too. So, despite evidence to the contrary, people still believe it. I can't escape it. But anyways, George has been very upfront that he's disappointed and mad that he didn't get Winds of Winter out before the final season of Game of Thrones. Why would he put up that front? Why would he pretend like that? I know people like to say George lies, but really he's a very upfront and honest man, so I just don't know where this rumor just keeps coming from, except for one man that was super bitter about how his character was treated in the show. I guess I'll leave you with a recent quote from George.
Though the show is finishing, my books are not finishing yet, but hopefully they will, and hopefully people will like how they finish.
George, I will happily wait for your version of how A Song of Ice and Fire ends, especially after everything that's going on currently in the show. I don't want to rush you. I think we all know what happens when you rush people. Let's just give him his time, and eventually we'll at least get one book. Right? Right.